Welcome to this tutorial video for getting started with Exquis, used with the application. For use with any other software or synthesizer, please refer to the PDF available below the video and in the description. Here, we present version 1.0.0 of the application. Some new features will be coming soon, so stay tuned for upcoming updates. Once the application and the provided sound plugins are installed, simply connect your Exquis to the computer, and it should light up like this. If the buttons at the bottom right are not lit, and the menus are unresponsive, simply check that the keyboard is set to MIDI input and MIDI output. Next, you'll need to scan the sound plugins on your computer. To do this, go to the menu at the top left, in Plugin List, and scan the different types of plugins, at least the VST3 if you have downloaded the Surge XT and Speedroom Lite plugins offered on our website. To take a quick tour of the interface, we have a toolbar at the top that can be used with the mouse. Tempo, metronome, rhythmic signature, meaning the number of beats per measure and the value of those beats. If you're unsure, stick with 4 quarters, the most common value in today's music, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have the 4 encoders of the keyboard, which are not active at the moment. We have buttons to undo and redo any action, a play, stop button, and a record button, all of which you'll find on the controller. And finally, a gain adjustment, overall volume, as well as a small button to cut off any lingering sound, just in case. Navigating the application can be done either with the controller or with the mouse, without affecting the display on the controller, to continue playing, for example. Before creating a short piece, let's go over the keyboard. We'll choose a sound by holding the sound button, then navigating through the sound tree to select a keyboard, and releasing the sound button. This creates a track, and we can play it. Note that each time you choose a sound in the sound menu, it creates a new track. To replace the sound of the current track, especially if you're exploring the sound bank, make it a habit to use the combination of the loops button plus sound button. Let's sculpt the sound a bit, using the 4 settings assigned to the encoders displayed at the top. The keys are sensitive to velocity, pressure, Z-axis, after touch, left, right tilt, X-axis, pitch bend, and up, down tilt, Y-axis. All of this is independent per key. Let's look at the layout of the notes. Horizontally, we have the semitones, and vertically, gradually, we have the thirds, either major to the right or minor to the left. Here the major chord, a small triangle to the right, and the minor chord to the left, or chords with a 7th, by adding a note. Building the most common chords involves assembling major and minor thirds. Depending on your playing comfort, chords may be easier to play by starting with the thumb. In terms of light, we have the scale, defaulting to C major, which you can also play with both hands. In this bright path, playing melodies, or chords, will allow you to play accurately without thinking too much. You can deviate from it, at your own risk. Let's create a short piece now. We'll follow the chronology of the buttons at the bottom of the keyboard. First, let's make some adjustments by holding the button on the controller. On the first encoder, we find the tempo. Let's set it to 100, for example. By clicking on the tempo encoder, you can turn the metronome on or off and hear it when the song is playing. The second encoder allows you to change the tonic note, in champagne color on the keyboard. It's the most important note in your piece, around which you'll build your melodies and chord progressions, usually the basic note of the first chord of the progression. The third encoder allows you to choose the scale, so to change the violet bright path around this tonic note. This is what will truly set the tone for your piece. Generally joyful in major, serious in natural minor, or even Oriental in dominant Phrygian. Today, there are 35 scales to explore. Let's go back to minor for our piece. The last encoder allows you to adjust the brightness of the keyboard. Outside of any menu, these buttons allow you to change the octave, so to play lower or higher, and in combination with the settings button, these buttons allow you to transpose the keyboard, which will mainly help you recenter the display of the scale if needed. Let's take a few seconds to look at the arpeggiator. If you hold down notes and touch the slider, you can break down your chords into arpeggios at different speeds. In the settings menu, you have the choice between different patterns. By default, the arpeggio follows the order in which you play the notes. Touch the slider once to switch to up, from lowest to highest, down to do the opposite, convergent to play the notes from the outside to the inside, divergent to do the opposite, or all to play all notes at the same time. Note that you can play with the different axes of the keys during an arpeggio, and even change notes. Now we're ready to record. Let's create a new track with a drum kit for a rhythm. Re-enable the metronome to create something well structured. If you don't want the metronome, the record button also blinks to the tempo in red and in purple on the first beat. The first beat is important. It's usually the strong beat that marks a beginning, the one where you tap your foot harder, the one where you hit the first bass drum, and especially the beat where your piece will start when you click play. It will also be important for the structure of the piece later. If you right-click on the record button, you can adjust the quantization, the rhythmic realignment of what you're going to record, defaulting to 16th notes. Similarly, if you're not sure what that is, stick with 1/16th, which will allow you to cleanly record the vast majority of simple rhythms, up to 4 notes per metronome beat here. In any case, I'll also show you how to change this value on a recording already made, so you don't have to re-record it. Let's create a classic rhythm for one measure, with a bass drum on the first beat, and 2 hits on the third beat. Take a snare drum on beats 2 and 4. Take a hi-hat and play with the slider and key pressure. Record it. And turn off the metronome. If you're a beginner, limit yourself to rhythms of 1 or 2 measures at most. The simplest is often the most effective, and it avoids building your piece on uncertain foundations. It may seem trivial, but don't forget to save your project from time to time via the menu at the top left. Let's continue our piece. Take a bass and lay the foundations of a 4-chord progression, 1 measure each. As a reminder, prioritize the tonic note for the first chord of your progressions. For now, the recording algorithm allows you to record loops of 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on, measures, rounding up to the nearest value, which will help you build pieces adhering to the widely spread structures in music. When you restart your piece by clicking play, you'll start at the beginning of the longest cycle. Again, this will also help you structure your piece. We'll come back to it in a moment. Let's enrich our piece with some chords following the bass notes. Feel free to intertwine different rhythms, different note heights, different accents, so that each instrument can be well identified in the ensemble, and to add richness to your pieces. If you're a beginner, there's no other secret than a lot of listening, a lot of practice, and a lot of experimentation. But don't worry, you'll be well guided and well supported in the player community. Now, let's take a look at our tracks by holding down the loops button. Here, we can adjust the overall volume. Each row of keys represents a track. Loops in playback are in green, and you can stop them by touching them briefly, with your choice taking effect when you release the loops button. You can record up to 4 loops per track, and note that for the offered drum kits, you can play up to 4 loops simultaneously. Except in this case, if you record again on a track that already contains loops, these loops will exclude each other. For each track, you can edit its volume, position in space, and modify its effects on the right. A rule when balancing your volumes: prefer reducing the sound of instruments that are too loud, rather than raising those that are too weak. I mentioned earlier, if you're not satisfied with the quantization of a loop, you can edit it with a right click. To delete a loop or a track, press its key or do it via a right click. Let's finish with a little improvisation with a lead. Follow the scale, follow the notes of the chords you recorded earlier, adding some embellishments, taking some rhythmic liberties, and you'll get better melodies and improvisations. If you want to deeply modify a sound, you can open its plugin with a right click to modify it. Then save it as a new preset. Refresh the list of presets, and you'll find this new preset in the sound menu. This is also how you can save presets from your own plugins, by creating a track with the mouse from the sound menu beforehand. To go further, let's talk about the structure of our piece. Firstly, especially if you're starting to have many tracks and loops, you'll probably want to save different states of your piece. Let's create, for example, a state where there's only bass drum and bass. Go to the Snaps menu. By adding a snap here, we create a snapshot of the current state of the piece. We can add a second one and select it to edit directly with the Loops button, and have only hi-hat, snare, and keyboard. Let's do the same for a third state where everything is in playback. Note that it's also possible to arm a different track on each snap. We can now switch between them instantly, and launch it upon releasing the Loops button. We can then determine the duration here. For now, it's in the number of repetitions of the longest playing cycle. In our case, the duration is 1 measure if only the drums are playing, 4 measures if the bass or chords are playing. All our cycles contain bass or chords, so each element lasts for 4 measures. Finally, determine their sequence, say 1, then 2, then 3. To start the sequence correctly, put our piece in stop, select the right snap, and press play. Now you have everything you need to play, waiting for the next version. Feel free to ask your questions in the video comments or within the community so that other players can benefit from the answers we provide. Don't hesitate to reach out to us for feedback or technical issues. Have fun, and see you soon.